He said I was just a jealous, bitter wife, watching him soar while I was left behind. He accepted awards for my work, while I filed papers in a temp office for $15 an hour. But he forgot one thing, a small detail, a $900,000 contract he'd forged my name on. And that one mistake was about to become the nightmare that destroyed everything he built. My name is Alara Vance, and I am 35 years old. The room I live in is 120 square feet, if you count the shower stall. It sits above a taqueria in a part of Austin that the tourist brochures ignore, where the humidity clings to everything and the air is permanently thick with the smell of old grease and exhaust. The ceiling fan clicks a weak, uneven rhythm, wobbling dangerously on its spindle, doing nothing but stir the stagnant heat. This is my life now. I work at a place called Dataflow Temp Services, a gray box of cubicles where I input data for $15 an hour. I am a ghost in beige. The work is meaningless, designed to be done by someone who is not supposed to have a name or a past. It is just enough to cover the $200 I slide into an envelope for my landlord every Friday before he cuts the power. I was walking back from the bus stop, the soles of my shoes thin enough to feel every crack in the blistering pavement, when I saw him. You cannot escape Gregory Marsh in this city. His face was 20 feet high, projected onto the side of the new glass skyscraper that pierced the downtown skyline. He was smiling, that polished, confident smile that used to be reserved for me. The digital letters pulsed beneath his chin, bright white against the sunset. Gregory Greg Marsh, Austin's tech visionary of the year. The air left my lungs. I had to lean against a lamppost, the metal hot against my shoulder, as a wave of nausea rolled through me. His voice, the one that used to whisper my name in the dark, echoed in my head, cold and precise as it was in the courtroom. You're just jealous, Alara. You never had the drive to succeed. You just wanted to ride my coattails. He said it to the judge, a look of profound pity on his handsome face. And the judge, and the lawyers, and the world had all nodded in agreement. The isolation is the real prison. It is total. Fiona Marsh, Greg's sister, was my best friend for a decade. She was my maid of honor. She held my hand when my mother was sick, and she was the one who methodically, surgically, cut me out of my own life. She made the calls. She had the quiet lunches with our mutual friends, her eyes brimming with false tears, telling them I was unstable, that I was obsessive and erratic, that the pressure of Greg's success had broken me. They all believed her. Sarah, Mark, even my old college roommate. My calls went unanswered. My texts were left on read. I was not just divorced. I was erased. After 8 months of this, of the gray cubicle and the greasy air and the absolute silence, you start to believe the narrative. You feel invisible because you have been rendered invisible. The woman on the billboard's reflection looked hollowed out, defeated. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just the bitter wife, the unstable failure who could not handle her husband's brilliance. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my room, the lock sticking, as it always did. My laptop, a dented old model from before Greg, whined in protest as it booted up. I scrolled through the usual emails spam, job alerts for more $15 an hour gigs, another final notice on a medical bill I could not pay. And then I saw it. My blood turned to ice. The sender's name was Arthur Graves. Arthur has been dead for 6 months. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. Arthur, my mentor, my partner, the man who had funded our original company with his life savings. He had died of a sudden, massive heart attack just 8 months ago. I clicked the email. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely control the trackpad. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained no greeting, no explanation. It was just a single link to an encrypted cloud server, and beneath it, a 32-character alphanumeric password. This was scheduled. He had set this up before he died, timed to be sent to me now. A cold dread filled me. I did not want to know. I was so tired of fighting, so tired of the pain. Part of me wanted to delete it, to shut the laptop, and to accept the gray, $15 an hour life they had assigned me. What was the point? What could it possibly change? But I was also the woman who built Aura. I was the woman who worked 72-hour shifts fueled by nothing but cold coffee and drive. And I was the woman who had nothing left to lose. My fingers, thick and clumsy, copied the password. I clicked the link. A stark white login screen appeared. I pasted the string of characters and hit enter. The server opened. It was not a collection of old photos or legal documents. It was not a final goodbye. It was a perfect, pristine, complete mirror of a project database. A full backup. I knew the file structure. I knew the naming conventions for the beta libraries. I knew the embedded comments in the source code. I knew them because I had written them. It was Aura, my Aura. The revolutionary logistics AI I had poured my life into. Every line of code, every algorithm, every iterative test, all time-stamped, all predating the existence of Marsh Dynamics by more than a year. Arthur had not just sent me a goodbye. He had sent me the ammunition. He had sent me a ghost, and it was a complete, mirrored backup of the very soul Greg had stolen. 5 years ago, my life was Technicolor. We were Innovatech Solutions, a name Greg had come up with, and we operated out of a converted warehouse on the east side before it was fashionable. The office was all exposed brick, cheap IKEA desks, and a whiteboard that stretched 20 feet long, covered in my equations. It was a glorious mess. We were a team, or so I thought. A family. Arthur Graves was the heart. He was 65 then, with kind eyes and a brilliant engineering mind that had been put out to pasture by a corporate buyout. He took his entire retirement fund, every penny he had, and invested it in me. "I'm betting on the architect, Ilara," he would say, "not the architecture." I was the brain. Aura was my thesis, my obsession. It was a predictive logistics AI, a system that could see the arteries of global shipping and anticipate a bottleneck before it even formed. I was the architect, the lead programmer, the one who lived on cold pizza and caffeine, often sleeping on a beanbag chair in the corner because I could not bear to leave a line of code unresolved. And Greg was the mouth. My Greg. He was handsome, charming, and could sell ice in a blizzard. He had a way of making people feel seen, of making them believe. His technical knowledge was laughably thin. He called my code the magic part, but in a boardroom, he was a god. He handled the marketing, the pitching, the handshaking. We were the perfect trio, the brain, the heart, and the mouth. And then came Fiona. She slipped into our lives not with a bang, but with a whisper. Greg's younger sister, she was perpetually between jobs, always showing up at the office around lunchtime with smoothies or sandwiches. She had this soft, empathetic way about her, always listening, her head tilted, her eyes wide with concern. She became my shadow, my confidant. "You look exhausted, Ilara," she would murmur, rubbing my shoulders while I was staring at a screen. "You're carrying this whole company." I married Greg on a sunny afternoon in October, under a massive oak tree. We wrote our own vows. I believed we were the ultimate power couple, that we were building an empire and a life, all at once. He was my partner in everything. The more Aura developed, the more complex the business side became. And the more I coded, the more Fiona seemed to attach herself to me. "Greg is working on some boring legal stuff," she would say, pulling up a chair. "Tell me about the code. I find it so fascinating. You're the real genius here." She elevated me, idolized me, and in doing so, she encouraged me to stay in my lane. "You're the creative, Ilara," she advised, her voice like warm honey. "You shouldn't have to clog that brilliant mind of yours with boring business papers. That's what Greg is good at. Just let him handle it. He's protecting you." I listened. I was deep in a breakthrough with Aura's predictive modeling. and the last thing I wanted to do was read 100-page legal documents. The day we signed the partnership agreements, I barely looked up from my laptop. Greg had called a meeting in the small conference room. He was wearing his important blue suit. "This is it," he announced, beaming as he dropped a thick stack of spiral-bound documents on the table in front of me and Arthur. "The final partnership agreement. This protects all three of us. It locks in our equity, our roles, everything." He seemed so proud. He had spent weeks with lawyers he had found, a top firm in Dallas. He said. I picked up the pen. "Wait just a moment, son," Arthur said, his brow furrowed. He was already on page 20. "This clause here, Section 4B, Key Man Provisions. It seems a bit aggressive. In the event of my incapacitation." Greg's pocket buzzed. He pulled out his phone, his face instantly dropping into a mask of concern. "Oh, no. I am so sorry. Arthur, this is the big investor from Houston. I absolutely have to take this. I'll be right back. Alara, you're fine to sign." "Right. It's just the standard stuff we talked about." "Of course," I said, already signing the last page. My mind was on a data bottleneck I needed to fix. "Here, Arthur," Fiona said, gliding into the room as Greg stepped out. She must have been waiting right outside. "You must be exhausted reading all that fine print." She smiled, and I noticed for the first time she had a different pen in her hand, a sleek, expensive-looking silver one. "I brought you a fresh coffee." She handed him the pen as I got up. "I'll go grab the coffee. Fiona, thanks." No, I'll get it," she insisted, a little too quickly. "You two finish up." She practically pushed me back into my chair, then hurried out, leaving the silver pen on the table in front of Arthur. When I looked back, Arthur was rubbing his temples, looking at Greg's empty chair, and then at the signature line. He picked up the pen Fiona had left and signed. I trusted my husband. I trusted my best friend. I trusted my mentor. I signed the documents without reading a single word past the title page. I sealed my own fate with a trusting, ignorant flourish of ink, all while dreaming of the beautiful revolutionary code I was building. The call came on a Tuesday. I was knee-deep in a recursive loop analysis when my phone rang. It was Greg, but his voice was flat, hollow. "Arthur's gone," he said. "They found him this morning. A massive heart attack." The world tilted. I remember sliding down the wall of my office, the whiteboard marker still in my hand, leaving a long, meaningless blue streak. Arthur, our anchor, our heart, gone. The funeral was a blur of black suits and hushed, respectful whispers. I was a wreck, hollowed out by a grief so profound I could barely stand. Greg, however, was a pillar of strength. He delivered a eulogy that was a masterpiece of polished sorrow, speaking of Arthur's vision and passion. Fiona, in a perfectly tailored black dress, stood beside him, dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. I found their composure odd, unsettling. Later, at the wake, I overheard them by the fireplace, their voices low and energetic. "We have to carry on his legacy," Greg was saying, swirling a glass of whiskey. "It's what he would have wanted. We have to move quickly." "You're right, Greg," Fiona agreed, touching his arm. "The vision is what matters." I thought it was just their way of processing, a different kind of grief. I was a fool. The fog of those first 2 weeks was thick. I barely ate. I did not code. I just sat in the dark. Then, exactly 14 days after we buried Arthur, Greg sent me a calendar invite. "Emergency board meeting," it read. The location was our conference room. When I walked in, I was surprised it was just him. He was at the head of the long table, not in his usual relaxed jeans, but in the same expensive Dallas suit he had worn to the funeral. He looked energized. "Alara, thanks for coming," he said, not standing up. "We have a lot to get through." "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice still hoarse from crying. "Where are the lawyers?" "Not necessary," he said. opening a sleek leather portfolio. "This is a simple matter, really. A formality." He slid a single document across the polished wood. It was a page from the partnership agreement. A section was highlighted in yellow. "As you know," he began, his voice taking on a smooth, rehearsed quality I had only ever heard him use on investors. "Arthur's passing was a tragedy, a terrible blow to us all." He paused, as if for effect. "It also triggered a specific provision in our agreement, Section 4B, the key man clause." I just stared at him. "The what?" He sighed, a small, patronizing sound. "The key man clause, Ilara, the one Arthur himself flagged. It states that in the event of the death or incapacitation of the primary key man, that being Arthur, as the principal investor, all controlling interest and intellectual property assets of Innovatech Solutions transfer immediately and fully to the remaining managing partner. The remaining, that's us, Greg. That's you and me." He gave me a look of profound pity. "No, Ilara, that's me. You were never a managing partner. You were chief technical architect. It's a different designation. You signed it. Arthur signed it. It's all right here." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "Greg, I'm saying Innovatech Solutions is being dissolved, effective immediately," he said, his voice bright and devoid of any emotion. "As the sole owner of the assets, I am absorbing them into my new venture." He slid a business card across the table. It was thick, expensive cardstock, embossed with a new logo, a sharp, stylized M that looked horrifyingly like a predator. "Marsh Dynamics." "Marsh Dynamics," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. You're stealing Aura." "I'm not stealing anything," he said, leaning back. "I'm protecting the IP. It's mine. Marsh Dynamics is launching next month, built on the Aura platform. Well, we're rebranding it, of course." I felt the room spin. The man I had married, the man I had built a life with, was looking at me like I was a stranger, an obstacle. "Don't worry," he continued, a magnanimous smile spreading across his face. "I've already drawn up a contract for you. I want you to still be involved. I'm offering you a position as a low-level consultant. You can help the new team get up to speed on the technical side, where you're comfortable. A low-level consultant, on my own project." The air crackled. The fog of grief was burned away by a sudden white-hot rage. "You bastard!" I hissed, standing so fast my chair fell over. "You're stealing my work. You're stealing Arthur's legacy. He's been dead for 2 weeks." Greg laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was cold and sharp. "This is just business. Ilara, it's what I do. You were always just the coder. You never understood the big picture. You'd never understand this." I ran from the room, my heart pounding, blind with fury and betrayal. I had to find Fiona. She would see the madness in this. She would talk sense into him. I found her in my office, or what used to be my office. My whiteboard, covered in my equations, had already been wiped clean. She was directing 2 men who were installing a new, obscenely large mahogany desk. "Fiona," I yelled, grabbing her arm. Did you know? Did you know what he's doing? He's stealing everything. He's dissolving Innovatech." Fiona pulled her arm from my grasp with a look of distaste, as if I were something dirty. She calmly straightened the cuff of her blouse. "He's not stealing, Ilara," she said, her voice a perfect, cold monotone. "He's securing the assets. He's doing this for us." "Us," I choked. "There is no us. He just destroyed our company." She finally looked at me. The soft, empathetic friend I had known for 5 years was gone. In her place was a stranger, her eyes as hard and cold as polished steel. "He's the visionary, Ilara. He's the one who made this all possible. You should be grateful he's offering you anything at all." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Honestly, don't be ungrateful. You're just jealous of him." I stared at Fiona, the woman who knew all my secrets, the woman I had trusted with my fears and my dreams, and in her cold eyes, I saw the truth. This was not a sudden betrayal. This was a plan. "I am not jealous, Fiona," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I am the architect, and I will see you both in court." I turned and walked out, not waiting for her reply. I spent that night on the phone, trying to find a lawyer, but the few I could get a hold of all winced when I mentioned Greg's new Dallas firm. I was too slow. They were faster. They had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Less than 48 hours later, a courier served me papers at our apartment. Greg had filed for divorce. I read the words, and the floor dropped out from under me. "Irreconcilable differences," the petition claimed, stemming from respondents' escalating mental instability, professional jealousy, and erratic behavior. His lawyer was a man named Marcus Thorne, a senior partner at a firm that had a skyscraper all to itself. He was a shark in a $5,000 suit. My court-appointed legal aid was a 20-something kid who looked overwhelmed just being in the same room. The deposition was a systematic dismantling of my sanity. It was not a legal proceeding, it was an execution. Fiona took the stand, her face a mask of profound, practiced sadness. She looked at the judge, her voice trembling just enough. "I love Ilara," she began, dabbing at an eye that held no tears. "But she became obsessed. After Arthur's passing, she just broke." Thorne led her through a curated list of my breakdowns. The time I cried in the office after a frustrating code review, a hysterical episode. Fiona called it. The 72-hour shift I pulled to finish the Aura Beta manic behavior. She would lock herself in her office for days, refusing to eat, muttering to herself. She twisted every moment of stress, every late-night-driven burst of creativity, into a symptom of madness. "She became so jealous of Greg," Fiona continued, shaking her head sadly. "He has such natural leadership. You know people are just drawn to him. She couldn't handle that he was the face of the company. She told me she deserved all the credit, that he was stealing her thunder." It became an obsession. Then came the documents. Thorne presented the partnership agreements, the ones I had signed without looking. My signature, bold and clear, was on every page. He walked the judge through the clauses, his voice a smooth, reasonable monotone. Section 4B, the Keyman Clause. Section 9C, which assigned all intellectual property, past, present, and future, created by any employee including the chief technical architect as work for hire, belonging exclusively to the partnership. "As you can see, Your Honor," Thorne said, "Mr. Marsh, as the sole surviving managing partner, has a fiduciary duty to protect these assets. Ms. Vance's claims to own this IP are frankly delusional. They are the product of a vindictive and unstable mind." My legal aide tried to object. He was swatted down like a fly. I was not just fighting for my company. I was fighting for my sanity, and I was losing. The lockout was immediate. My keycard to the office was deactivated. When I tried to log into my email, to find my own files, the server returned a stark message. "User not found." My digital life, my code, my notes, my entire professional history deleted. Wiped. The judge, a man who clearly admired Greg's sharp suit and confident success, looked at me unemployed, disheveled, and now legally painted as hysterical with barely concealed disdain. He granted the divorce. He upheld the partnership agreement. My claims to Aura were dismissed as frivolous. I was awarded almost nothing. No spousal support, as I was clearly educated and capable of finding work. No stake in Marsh Dynamics, as it was a new entity. I was to receive a one-time payment of $20,000 for my contributions and was ordered to stay 100 yards away from the Marsh Dynamics offices. The humiliation was not over. It just went public. The day the divorce was finalized, the smear campaign began. Tech blogs, the ones who had been courting Greg for interviews, suddenly ran stories about the troubled wife of Tech's new visionary. I was the bitter ex, the cautionary tale. I was the woman who couldn't keep up and had a dramatic breakdown when her husband's genius eclipsed her. Greg and Fiona had fed them the exact narrative from the courtroom. I was a pariah. I had no job, no reputation, and now, no friends. I was sitting on the floor of our beautiful high-rise apartment, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, surrounded by boxes. I was packing the few personal things I was allowed to take when the final notice was taped to my door. It was not from Greg. It was from a holding company, an eviction notice. I did not understand. I called my lawyer, the kid, who did some digging, the apartment, the car I drove, the furniture. It was all owned by Imitate Solutions. It had never been in Greg's name or mine. It was a corporate asset. And when Innovatech was dissolved, all its assets were transferred to the new sole owner, Greg. He was not just divorcing me, he was evicting me. He was seizing everything, the company, the code, my reputation, my friends, and now my home. I left with 2 suitcases, a box of books, and my aging laptop. I had $3,000 left from the settlement after paying my legal aid. I watched the glass building shrink in the rearview mirror of my 10-year-old car. A woman erased, pushed out onto the street, exactly as planned. The air in my tiny room was so thick I could barely breathe, but I did not notice. I sat cross-legged on the lumpy mattress, the laptop hot on my legs, the weak ceiling fan clicking its uneven rhythm above me. I was staring at a ghost. Arthur's digital archive was not just a backup, it was a fortress. He had been meticulous. I navigated through the nested folders, my fingers flying across the trackpad. I found the Aura repository first. My baby. Every module, every function, every late-night comment I had left for myself, and the timestamps. Oh, the timestamps. They were a perfect, immutable record, showing years of work, all predating the existence of Marsh Dynamics. This was the proof that I was the architect. But there was more. Deeper in. I found a folder labeled Private. My heart hammered. This felt wrong, like reading a diary. But Arthur had sent it to me. He wanted me to see. Inside were his medical records. I clicked open a PDF from his cardiologist, dated just 3 weeks before he died. Patient complains of persistent tachycardia and acute anxiety, recommending immediate reduction in stimulants and stress. Stimulants. I clicked on the next file. Personal log. TXT. It was a simple text file, a journal he had been keeping for the last few months of his life. I scrolled down, my blood turning to ice. Entry. March 12th. Greg is pushing everyone too hard. He seems frantic. He brought me one of those special energy drinks this morning. Says they're imported from Germany, packed with nootropics. The caffeine content must be astronomical. I feel wired, but my heart is pounding like a drum. Entry March 19th. Another drink from Greg today. I told him they were too strong, that I was having trouble sleeping. He just smiled and said, "We're in the final stretch. Arthur, we need you sharp." He called me the key man. I did not like the way he said it. Entry March 27th. Woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I cannot focus. I feel jittery and sick. Greg's ambition is starting to frighten me. He sees Alara's work as a commodity, a barrel of oil to be sold, and he sees me as the old man guarding the pump. Entry April 2nd. I told Greg I was seeing my doctor about the palpitations. He got angry. He said I was being weak, that I was jeopardizing our launch. He offered me something better to calm the nerves. I refused. He is not just ambitious. He is ruthless. And then, the last file in the folder. A draft. Saved, but never sent. The recipient was a lawyer I did not recognize. Subject urgent. Partnership concerns. I need to schedule an emergency meeting. I am in fear for my health and my position at Innovatech. I believe my partner, Gregory Marsh, is intentionally compromising my health in an effort to trigger a key man provision in our agreement. The stress, combined with the constant supplements he is pushing on me, is having a severe physical effect. I fear he is trying to push me out, or worse. I need counsel immediately. He never sent it. He died 2 days later. I leaned back against the peeling drywall, feeling profoundly sick. This was not a natural death. This was not a simple heart attack. Greg had pushed him, doped him, stressed him, all to trigger the clause he knew I had never read. He had killed him. Maybe not with a gun, but with ambition and a steady supply of high-grade stimulants. I needed to get out of that folder. I needed air. I needed something cold, logical, mathematical. I clicked back to the main directory, back to the business files, my mind reeling. I clicked into a folder labeled Contracts, and then Pending. I saw the usual vendor agreements, lease documents, and then one I did not recognize. Apex Logistics Consulting Agreement, PDF. Apex Logistics. I knew them. They were a mid-level shipping company, one Greg had been trying to land as a client. I opened the file. It was not a proposal. It was a fully executed contract. It was a side deal, an agreement to license a core beta version of the Aura platform for a one-time integration fee. It was dated 3 days after Arthur's funeral. I scrolled through the technical appendices, a cold dread rising in my throat. This was not some minor piece of code. He had sold them the engine, the predictive core I had spent 2 years perfecting. And then I got to the signature page. It was on imitate letterhead. It required 2 signatures for any deal over $50,000. Arthur Graves, managing partner, and Ilara Vance, chief technical architect. Arthur's line was blank. He was already dead. My line was signed. A perfect, clean, digital signature. My signature. I had never seen this document in my life. My eyes scanned the page, frantic. The payment terms. A single wire transfer for $900,000. $900,000. I checked the routing numbers. The payment was not directed to Innovatech Solutions. It was directed to MGH Holdings, LLC. I had never heard of it, but I had seen that name before, on the eviction notice, the holding company that owned our apartment. He had done it. He had been so arrogant, so certain of my defeat, that he got sloppy. He was in a rush. He needed the capital to launch Marsh Dynamics, to pay Thorne's massive retainer, to build his new empire. So he took a shortcut. While I was grieving, he was stripping the company's assets. He forged my name on a $900,000 contract, siphoned the money into his personal holding company, and then used that money to fund the very machine that was destroying me. He had not just stolen my company. He had committed wire fraud. He had committed identity theft. He had committed forgery. This was not a civil suit about a contract I was too trusting to read. This was a felony. The clicking of the ceiling fan seemed to fade. The greasy air in the room felt sharp and clear. I was not a victim anymore. I was not the jealous wife. I was the woman he had forged, and I had the receipt. The frantic, desperate grief was gone. In its place, a cold, quiet hum settled into my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get just before a major coding breakthrough, when the noise of the world fell away and all I could see was the logic, the path. Greg had been right about one thing in that courtroom, proving intellectual property theft is a nightmare. It is a long, expensive, he said. She said, battle of narratives, and he had already won that war. But this was different. The $900,000 contract was not a narrative. It was a data point. It was a felony. You cannot rebrand a forged signature. You cannot outvision wire fraud. This was the weapon. I took the last of my money, the pathetic $3,000 I had been hoarding, and I found a lawyer, not a partner at a glass tower firm, not a legal aid kid. I found Nina Rosales. Her office was a cramped walk-up space above a bakery, smelling faintly of sugar and ambition. She was in her early 30s, with eyes so sharp they seemed to cut the air, and she wore a leather jacket over a simple black dress. Her website specialized in one thing: forensic corporate fraud. She was a hunter. I did not cry. I did not plead. I walked in, sat down, and opened my laptop. I put Arthur's files on her desk. "Here is the original partnership agreement for Innovatech Solutions," I said, my voice flat. "Here is the key man clause. Here is the log of my late partner, Arthur Graves, documenting the stimulants my ex-husband was giving him. And here," I said, opening the final file, "is a $900,000 contract with Apex Logistics, dated after Arthur's death, with my forged digital signature, routing payment not to Innovatech, but to a private holding company." She did not speak for 20 minutes. She just read, her eyes scanning, absorbing. Finally, she looked up at me, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "He's sloppy," she said. It was the highest compliment. "The IP theft is a mess. The keyman clause is a civil nightmare. But this," she tapped the Apex contract, "this is a kill shot. This is indisputable wire fraud. This is a federal crime, and it's a breach of fiduciary duty so profound it invalidates everything that came after it. He didn't just steal the company, he used a forged document to do it. We have him, Ms. Vance." "Ilara," I said. "Call me Ilara." "We have him, Ilara," she repeated. "But he has a $5,000 an hour lawyer. We have to be smarter. We don't just sue. We build a cage so tight that by the time he sees the bars, it's already too late." For the next 6 weeks, I was no longer a temp worker. I was an architect. I worked from my tiny, hot room, but I was building the most complex system of my life. I used Arthur's detailed financial records. He had backed up everything to trace the $900,000, from Apex to MGH Holdings, LLC, and then out. I watched the money move. $200,000 to Marcus Thorne's law firm, a retainer, posted 2 days before Greg even filed for divorce. $500,000 to a new account, the one that became the seed capital for Marsh Dynamics. The rest was bled out in smaller increments: the new lease on the high-rise office, the PR firm that started the smear campaign, a $10,000 bonus to Fiona. I was building a timeline, a perfect, unassailable chain of data that linked Greg's fraud directly to my execution. But Nina warned me a legal case moves slowly. Greg was flying high, a tech visionary about to raise hundreds of millions. We needed to clip his wings, to distract him. So, I opened a second front. I used a public library computer, a VPN, and an anonymous, encrypted email service. I found the email address of a specific reporter at a major tech journal, a woman named Jessica Riley, known for her sharp, investigative takedowns. I did not send her the fraud. That was my trump card. I sent her something else. I sent her a gift from the architect. The subject line read, "A question for Marsh Dynamics." The body was short. "You should ask Gregory Marsh why his revolutionary Aura platform is still vulnerable to a Module 1 injection flaw. It's a gaping security hole, right in the core of his vision. Tell him an old friend says hello." I knew that flaw. I had created it as a developer-only backdoor for diagnostics. I had planned to patch it, but I was the only one who knew it was there, and in his arrogant rush to rebrand my work as his own, he had not hired anyone smart enough to find it. 2 days later, a small article appeared on the tech blog. Sources raise security concerns over Marsh Dynamics' AI platform. It was a pinprick, a minor PR problem. Greg's team issued a standard denial, so I leaked another, more serious flaw, and then another. The whispers started. On tech forums, on investor message boards, Greg Marsh, the visionary, was running a sloppy shop. His code was buggy. His launch was unstable. It was a distraction. It was a way to start pulling the threads on his perfect narrative, to remind him and the world that he was not a god. He was just a mouth. I stopped looking in the mirror and seeing a victim. The hollowed-out woman was gone. My eyes were clear. My hands were steady. I was focused. I was cold. I was the architect, and I was building my case. One rainy afternoon, my burner phone rang. It was Nina. "You're not going to believe this," she said. Her voice was sharp, electric. "I've been digging into Apex Logistics, the $900,000 company." "What about them?" "I was trying to find out why they'd signed such a sloppy, one-sided deal, so I ran a check on their CEO, a man named Daniel Petrova." And, Nina said, "Daniel Petrova is the first cousin and former college roommate of one Marcus Thorne, Greg's divorce lawyer." I sat down on the edge of my lumpy bed. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening snap. "It wasn't a sale, was it?" I whispered. "No," Nina said, her voice hard as steel. "It was a payoff. Greg didn't just sell them the code. He used $900,000 of his own company's money to pay the law firm that was going to destroy you in court. He laundered the bribe through a shell deal with his lawyer's cousin. This isn't just fraud, Alara. This is a conspiracy." Greg was on the cover of Austin Business Monthly. He was the keynote speaker at the Texas Tech Summit. Marsh Dynamics was the city's new unicorn, the golden child, and everyone wanted a piece. He was days, maybe hours, away from closing his Series B funding round. We were not talking about a small amount. This was a $100 million injection that would value his stolen company at nearly $1 billion. He was about to become untouchable. He was about to become a god, built on my code and Arthur's grave. "They're signing the term sheet on Friday," Nina said, her voice crackling over my burner phone. "The wire transfers are scheduled for Monday. Then we file on Thursday," I said, my voice quiet. "At 4:55 p.m., just before the court closes for the weekend. It's a beautiful move, Alara," she said. "The investors won't be able to get a judge to respond until Tuesday at the earliest. It gives them 3 full days to panic." On Thursday afternoon, I was sorting spreadsheets at Dataflow Temp Services, the air thick with the smell of microwaved popcorn. At precisely 4:55 p.m., Nina Rosales filed a motion for an emergency injunction in Travis County District Court. It was a masterpiece of legal destruction. She did not lead with the complex, hard-to-prove intellectual property theft. She did not lead with Arthur's suspicious death. She led with the money. The filing stated that the core asset of Marsh Dynamics, the Aura platform, was a disputed asset. Why? Because the company itself, Marsh Dynamics, was founded using funds obtained through criminal fraud. The injunction claimed that Innovatech Solutions was not dissolved, it was fraudulently liquidated. The centerpiece of the filing, Exhibit A, was the $900,000 Apex Logistics contract. Exhibit B was the bank statement from MGH Holdings, showing the incoming wire. Exhibit C was the forged digital signature, backed by an affidavit from a forensic data specialist. Exhibit D was the bank transfer from MGH Holdings to Marcus Thorne's law firm. Exhibit E was the transfer from MGH Holdings to the new Marsh Dynamics seed account. We were not just claiming I was the true creator. We were claiming the entire company was the fruit of a poisonous tree, a tree fertilized with a $900,000 felony. The bomb went off on Friday morning. The investors' legal teams, doing their final due diligence, saw the filing. It was like dropping a block of ice into a pot of boiling water. The deal did not just stall, it froze solid. A $100 million deal does not proceed when the company's entire origin story is tied to an active, documented claim of wire fraud and conspiracy. The Series B was dead. I knew he would be furious. I knew he would come for me. But he did not come himself. He sent his sister. She found me at the bus stop, the one where I always saw his smug face on the billboard. She pulled up in a new white Mercedes convertible, a car I'm sure my code had paid for. "Get in, Alara," she said, not looking at me. She was wearing oversized sunglasses. "No," I said. She let out an exasperated sigh, the sound of someone deeply inconvenienced. "Fine." She got out of the car, leaving the engine running, and walked over to me. She was trying to look concerned, the way she had in the old days, but her jaw was too tight. "What you're doing is insane," she whispered, her eyes darting around the street. "You're ruining him." "He ruined himself, Fiona, and he ruined me." "He's under a lot of pressure," she hissed, her voice cracking. "You have no idea. This injunction, it's a disaster. The investors are threatening to sue him." "Good." She took a deep breath, trying to regain control. The concerned friend returned. "Look, Alara, he just wants this to go away. We know this has been hard on you. He feels terrible about how it all worked out." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a bank envelope. She tried to press it into my hand. "What is this?" I asked, not taking it. "It's $50,000, she said, as if she were offering me the world. "Cash. It's all he could pull together right now. All you have to do is sign this." She pulled out a folded document, an NDA, a full and final release of all claims. $50,000. For my life's work. For Arthur's life. I started to laugh. It was a cold, rusty sound that came from deep in my chest. 50,000. After he stole a company you're trying to value at $1 billion. You're not just a traitor, Fiona. You're bad at math. Her face went pale, then flushed a dark, ugly red. The mask was gone. "You stupid, arrogant bitch," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "You think you're so smart. You're nothing. You're a temp worker at a data farm. Greg will crush you. He'll bury you in legal fees until you are begging for this 50,000. You have no idea who you're messing with." "No, Fiona," I said, stepping closer, my voice perfectly calm. "You have no idea who you are messing with." I turned and walked away. I did not get on the bus. I walked the 2 miles back to my room, the adrenaline surging in my veins. I sat down at my laptop and opened my anonymous email account. "Fiona just tried to bribe me with $50,000. I wrote to Jessica Riley, the tech reporter. She seemed desperate. I hit send. The next day, Jessica Riley's story did not just run, it exploded. The headline was brutal. Tech's visionary. Gregory Marsh sees $100 funding round freeze amid fraud allegations and critical security flaws. The article was a masterpiece. Jessica had tied everything together. My anonymous tips about the buggy, vulnerable code, the sudden panicked freeze of the Series B, and now the explosive injunction alleging a $900,000 conspiracy. It was not just a legal problem for him anymore, it was a public narrative. The story painted a picture not of a genius, but of a fraud, a man who stole code he did not understand, code that was now failing, and who had allegedly committed a felony to fund his rise. Greg's face was still on the billboard, but for the first time, the tech visionary of the year looked like a cheap, desperate liar. The first crack had become a fissure. A company built on hype and stolen code has one fatal weakness: it needs a constant, massive infusion of cash. The moment our injunction froze the Series B, the clock started ticking. Greg's entire empire was a facade, and the $100 million loan he was counting on to pay for it all had just vanished. The first sign was the whispers. The tech blogs, once his personal fan club, were now running inside stories of panic at Marsh Dynamics. Lavish employee perks were cut. The expensive downtown office lease was suddenly under review. Paychecks were late. Greg, the visionary, was no longer a charismatic leader. He was a cornered animal, reportedly screaming at his leadership team and blaming everyone but himself. The rats were getting nervous. That is when the email appeared in my secure inbox, the one I had set up just for this. The sender was anonymous. "He's lying to them, Alara, to all of them." My heart stopped. I replied with one word, "Who?" The response came an hour later. "Ben Carter. I was lead developer at Innovatech. I respected you. I respected Arthur. What Greg is doing, it's not right. He's destroying your work. Ben, I remembered him, quiet, brilliant, a man who loved clean code as much as I did. He had been one of my best. Greg, of course, had kept him on, needing someone who actually understood the platform. What is he lying about? I wrote. The security flaws, your leaks. He knows about all of them. He's known for months. I told him myself. I told him the Module 1 flaw was critical, that it could compromise the entire client database. He told me to shut up and bury it. My fingers were trembling. Can you prove it? A minute later, a file transfer appeared. It was a chain of internal emails, a conversation between Ben, two other senior devs, and Gregory Marsh. Ben's original warning was there, clinical and precise. The core vulnerability is systemic. We need to halt development and rebuild the kernel. Estimated time 6 weeks. Greg's reply, sent 3 minutes later, was all caps, a screaming torrent of narcissistic rage. Absolutely not. We do not halt. We are days from a $100 million deal. Are you insane? Bury it. Patch the UI so it looks secure. We will deal with the kernel after the wire transfer. This conversation is over. He had known. While he was pitching his flawless AI to the world, while he was raising a historic funding round, he was actively, knowingly covering up a flaw that exposed his entire system. I forwarded the entire package to Nina. She called me 30 seconds later, her voice a low, excited hum. This is it, Alara. This is the one. The fraud case is good, but this is a gift from God. This is not just a lawsuit. This is a federal crime. What do you mean? He's not just lying to his employees. He's lying to his investors. He is actively and willfully misrepresenting the stability of his core product in the middle of a capital raise. He's telling them they're buying a fortress, when he knows it's a paper house with no locks. She was not just a lawyer. She was an architect of a different kind. She did not just file another motion. She picked up the phone and called the Securities and Exchange Commission. She sent the SEC's Enforcement Division in Dallas the entire beautiful, damning email chain. The injunction had been a fire. This was an explosion. The news hit the wires 2 days later. SEC opens formal investigation into Marsh Dynamics, alleging fraudulent misrepresentation to investors. It was over. In the tech world, an SEC investigation is a death sentence. The Series B was not just frozen, it was vaporized. The original investors, the ones who had given him his first $50 million, were now facing their own legal exposure. Greg was radioactive. The SEC began the process of financial discovery, placing his accounts under scrutiny. He was trapped. And that is when the rat tried to jump ship. My burner phone rang, a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. A message appeared a moment later. It was Fiona. She was weeping. It was not the polished, fake sadness from the courtroom. This was the ugly, panicked sobbing of a trapped animal. Ilara, please, God, pick up. You have to help me. It was him. It was all him. I didn't know what he was doing. I swear I didn't. He's a monster. He made me lie in court. She took a gasping breath. I'll testify. I'll tell you everything. I'll tell the SEC. I'll tell the police. I'll tell them about Arthur. I'll give you everything you need to put him away. Just tell your lawyer to get me immunity. Please, Alara. He's going to drag me down with him. I was just scared. I listened to the message, my face perfectly calm. The woman who had systematically erased my life, who had called me jealous and unstable, was now begging me to save her. I forwarded the audio file to Nina. Your move, I wrote. Nina's reply was instant. Do not respond. Do not talk to her. Let her panic. She's lying. What do you mean? She sounds terrified. She's terrified she's going to jail, which she is. Nina wrote back. But she's lying about not knowing. I've been digging through Arthur's payroll archives, the ones from before the Keyman clause. I was cross-referencing the wire fraud. A new file appeared in my inbox. It was not an email. It was a scanned payroll ledger from Innovatech Solutions, dated 5 years ago. It listed our 3 salaries: Arthur's as managing partner, mine as chief technical architect, Greg's as head of business development, and a 4th name, Fiona Marsh, strategic consultant. Her salary was $150,000 a year. It was paid in weekly installments, starting from the first week we opened our doors. I stared at the numbers. Fiona, my unemployed best friend, the one who brought smoothies and rubbed my shoulders, who told me not to worry my creative head about the boring paperwork. She had been on Greg's secret payroll from day one. She was not just a passive accomplice who had been scared. She was a paid spy. She was a co-conspirator. That $900,000 contract was not just Greg's fraud. It was their fraud. She had been a part of the conspiracy from the very beginning. Greg was drowning. The SEC investigation had frozen his personal and corporate accounts. His board of directors, the ones he had handpicked, had all resigned in a single panicked afternoon. His investors were suing him, not just for their money back, but for fraud, seeking punitive damages that would have bankrupted him 10 times over. Marsh Dynamics was not just failing, it was a crater, and he was at the bottom of it. That is when the call came, not from him, but from Marcus Thorne. His voice, once so smooth and dripping with superiority, was clipped and strained. Mr. Marsh is requesting a final meeting. Ms. Vance, off the record. He wants to make things right. He is prepared to offer you the company. I was in Nina's tiny, cluttered office. I put the phone on speaker. Nina snorted, not even looking up from her legal briefs. "It's a trap," she mouthed. "I know," I said, speaking to her, not the phone. Then, into the receiver. "Where?" "He asked to meet at the old Innovatech office, the warehouse, tomorrow, noon. He asks you to come alone, to be reasonable." "I'll be there," I said, and hung up. "You're not going alone," Nina stated, finally looking at me. "I wouldn't dream of it," I replied. "But I am going. He's a narcissist whose world is ending. He's not going to offer me a deal. He's going to try and justify himself. He needs to confess, to tell one last person how smart he was." Nina tapped her pen against her desk. "Then we don't just record it, we give him a stage." The plan was simple. I would go in, wired for high-definition audio and video via a button camera small enough to be a design feature on my jacket. Nina and a private security guard she'd hired, a mountain of a man named Alex, would be in a van 1 block away, watching the live feed. The old Innovatech warehouse smelled like dust and bankruptcy. The for seizure notice was taped to the glass door. Inside, it was a hollowed-out carcass. The desks were gone, the beanbag chairs, the coffee machine. The only thing left was my 20-foot whiteboard, still mounted to the far wall. A faint blue streak, the one I'd made when I heard Arthur was dead, still visible. Greg was standing in the middle of the room. He looked like a ghost. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was thinning and unkempt, and his eyes were bloodshot and wild. The visionary was gone. "Ilara," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "Greg." I stopped 20 feet away from him, setting my laptop bag down on the concrete floor. "You did this," he whispered, gesturing at the empty room. "You destroyed it. It was beautiful, and you destroyed it." "I didn't destroy anything, Greg. I just turned on the lights. You were the one rotting in the dark." His face twisted, the mask of the calm businessman evaporating to reveal the desperate, raging child beneath. "I deserved it," he screamed, his voice echoing in the vast, empty space. "Me, not you. I'm the one who did the work. I'm the one who shook the hands, who smiled, who built the vision. While I wrote the code," I said, my voice lethally quiet. "Code," he spat, as if the word were poison. "You're just a coder. You're a mechanic. You build the engine, Ilara, but I'm the one who can drive. You're just a pair of hands. I am the vision. Without me, aura was just a pile of notes. And Arthur? I asked, the name sucking the air from the room. Was he just a mechanic too? He stalked towards me, his eyes wide. Arthur. Arthur was old. He was scared. He was in the way. You killed him, I said. It was not an accusation. It was a fact. He stopped, inches from my face. I could smell the sour stench of whiskey on his breath. He was a liability, he hissed. He was complaining about his heart. He was going to a lawyer. He was going to destroy us, to pull his funding, all because he was too old to keep up. He had to go. The energy drinks, I whispered, feeling the small camera on my chest capturing his confession. He laughed, a horrifying, choking sound. He was so trusting. He'd drink anything I gave him. A few extra-strength stimulants to get his heart pounding. A few of his actual pills swapped out for placebos. He was old. It was his time. He needed to get out of the way of the vision. He had said it. He had confessed to it all. He seemed to shrink, the burst of rage leaving him exhausted. He backed away, running his hands through his thinning hair. But that doesn't matter, he muttered, trying to reassemble himself. This is a mess. You've poisoned the well, the SEC, the investors. It's all just noise. We can fix this. He walked over to his briefcase and pulled out a document. He slid it onto the floor between us. A final offer, Ilara, a real partnership. I did not move. What is it? 50-50, he said, trying to muster the old charm. Marsh Dynamics. You and me. We'll tell them it was a marital dispute. You'll tell them the $900,000 contract was a misunderstanding. You'll help me fix the code. We'll stabilize the company. We'll rebuild. I looked down at the document. Nina had predicted this. 50% of the equity. I read the keyline. In exchange for assuming 50% of all outstanding corporate debt and legal liability. I looked up at him. The company is worth nothing. It's insolvent. You're being sued for over $100 million. You're not offering me half the company. Greg, you're offering me half the prison sentence. It's the only way, he roared. You have to take it. You have to help me. No. The word hung in the air. He stared at me, his mind racing, and then his wild eyes locked onto my laptop bag. The files, he snarled. Arthur's files. It's all in there, isn't it? The only copies? Greg, don't, I said, taking a step back. You think you can just walk out of here and hand that to them? He lunged, not for me, but for the bag. He grabbed it, ripped it open, and pulled out my laptop. No, I yelled. He raised it high above his head and brought it down with all his strength against the concrete floor. The sound of shattering plastic and metal was a gunshot in the empty room. He stomped on it, again and again, his face a mask of purple rage. It's gone, he screamed, panting, triumphant. It's all gone. There's no proof. It's just my word against yours. It's over. I win. He stood there, breathing heavily, a crazed smile spreading across his face. The side door of the warehouse burst open. Alex, the security guard, entered first, his hand on his hip. Nina was right behind him, holding her phone up, its screen glowing. Greg's face collapsed. What? Who? You were recording. He pointed a trembling finger at my chest. A wire. It doesn't matter. It's inadmissible you coerced me. My lawyer will destroy it. I just looked at him, my heart cold and steady. I reached up and tapped the small black button camera on my lapel. You're right, Greg. You're the vision. But you're a terrible planner, I said. You're sloppy. You always were. He stared at the camera, not understanding. You think I'd risk the only evidence on a laptop? You think I'd rely on a simple audio recording that Thorne could tie up in court for years? I shook my head. I'm an architect. I build systems. And this camera, Greg, it's been live streaming. His bloodshot eyes went wide. Nina has a copy, I said, nodding to her. Alex has a copy. And, more importantly, Jessica Riley at the Tech Journal just received the full, high-definition feed. So did the lead investigator at the SEC. Your entire confession. About Arthur. About the stimulants. About the fraud. It's not just evidence anymore, Greg. It's public. It's news. He looked at the shattered remains of my laptop, then at the tiny, unblinking lens on my chest, and he finally understood. The trap was never for me. It was for him, and he had just performed beautifully. Greg didn't even have time to react. The wail of sirens, distant when I first heard them, was now deafeningly close. Alex, the security guard, had already moved to block the only exit. Greg's wild, bloodshot eyes darted from me, to Nina, to the pulverized remains of my laptop, and finally back to the tiny, unblinking lens on my chest. He was a rat in a cage, and the walls were closing in. The police did not knock. They burst in, weapons drawn, responding to Alex's call of an active assault and a live-streamed confession. They cuffed Greg right there on the dusty concrete floor, surrounded by the ghosts of the company he had stolen and the wreckage of the laptop he thought was his salvation. He was screaming, of course, babbling about entrapment, about his rights, about Marcus Thorne. But the assault charge was clean, and the video feed already preserved on a dozen different servers was pristine. His confession to causing Arthur's death was not just an admission. It was a proud, narcissistic boast. Fiona's arrest was quieter. They found her at her apartment, her bags packed, likely tipped off by the news of the SEC investigation. But her panicked, weeping voicemail to me was already in the hands of the district attorney. That, combined with Nina's discovery of the secret payroll and her clear signature on the MGH Holdings bank accounts, was more than enough. She was not just an accomplice. She was a co-conspirator. The woman who had pretended to be my friend while drawing a six-figure salary to spy on me was charged with wire fraud and conspiracy. The legal avalanche was total. The SEC's case, built on Ben Carter's emails and the $900,000 fraud, was the central pillar. It proved he had lied to his investors. The criminal case, built on his own confession and Arthur's journal, was the hammer. Marsh Dynamics, a company with no funding, no leadership, and an origin story based entirely on a felony, evaporated. The glass tower went dark. The assets were seized. The vision was over. Greg's trial was a public spectacle, but a very short one. Marcus Thorne, facing his own ethics investigation and potential disbarment over the Apex Logistics conspiracy, was not in the courtroom. Greg's new court-appointed lawyer looked like he was in over his head. The prosecution played the high-definition video for the jury. They heard him confess to swapping Arthur's medication. They heard him confess to using the stimulants. They heard him scream that Arthur had to go. They saw the $900,000 contract, the clear motive to take control. They saw the bank transfers. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. They found him guilty on all counts second-degree murder, multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy. The judge, the same man who had dismissed my claims in the divorce, looked at Greg with pure contempt. He sentenced the tech visionary to 35 years to life in a maximum security state prison. Fiona, facing the prospect of decades in a federal prison, did the only thing she could. She took a plea deal. She testified against her brother, filling in any tiny gaps that remained, weeping her crocodile tears for the jury. It did not save her. Her role as a paid co-conspirator was undeniable. In exchange for her testimony, she received a reduced sentence, but not immunity. 8 years in federal prison. With the criminals put away, Nina and I went to bankruptcy court. It was no longer a fight. It was a formality. Nina presented the evidence that Innovatech Solutions had been fraudulently dissolved, its assets stolen via a criminal conspiracy. The court agreed. All of Greg's claims to the intellectual property were voided. The full and unencumbered rights to the Aura source code, including all derivatives, were returned to the sole surviving non-criminal partner of Innovatech Me. Arthur's last gift, the digital ghost on his server, had finally come home. I did not want to restart the company. I did not want to be a CEO. I had been the architect of a revolution, and then the architect of a cold, precise revenge. I was done building. So, I did what Greg had always wanted to do. I sold Aura, but I did it my way. Nina organized a blind auction. The tech giants, the ones who had watched the bloodbath from afar, descended. They all wanted the most infamous and most brilliant logistics AI ever created. The bidding war was silent, digital, and utterly ferocious. The final winning bid was staggering. Tens of millions of dollars. Enough to live 10 lifetimes over. Enough to erase the memory of the $15 an hour cubicle in the room that smelled of grease. But I had one last move, one final detail. When the deal closed and the press releases had to be sent, I gave Nina a very specific instruction. The next day, every tech journal that had once celebrated Greg and smeared me ran the story. The headlines were uniform. Ilara Vance sells Aura platform for $900,000. It was a number that made no sense to the public, a pittance for such a revolutionary piece of tech, but I knew Greg would see it on the prison television. I knew Fiona would read it in the prison library. It was not the price of the code. It was the price of their downfall. It was the exact figure from the forged contract they had used to destroy me, now serving as the final public monument to their failure. With the real money, the tens of millions they would never know about, I created the Arthur Graves Foundation for Ethical Innovation. We find the architects, the coders, the mechanics who just want to build beautiful things. We fund them, and we provide them with the best, most ruthless lawyers in the country, ensuring that no visionary can ever steal their work again. Greg was right. I am just a coder. I am a mechanic. And I dismantled his empire, bolt by fraudulent bolt, until nothing was left. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are all listening from. So please drop a comment below and let's connect and share our thoughts. I invite you to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and if you really enjoyed it, please support us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.